What if the person you mourned for 3 years was sitting 5 rows ahead of you on a plane? What if your own child, who barely remembers his father, recognized him in a complete stranger? For Hannah, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was a heart-stopping reality that ambushed her under the blistering Miami sun. This story will make you question everything you think you know about the people you love. It's about a lie more destructive than death, and a forgiveness that might be too heavy a burden to bear. Prepare for an emotional journey that will change everything. Hannah considered herself a widow. That title had been branded onto her soul 3 years ago, on a bitter February day. She received a call that her husband, Liam, had vanished during a solo snowmobile trip at Lake Tahoe. The vehicle was found near a patch of thin ice. His body was never recovered, but the search and rescue team was blunt. 0 chance of survival. Liam, a charismatic real estate developer, had left her and their 5-year-old son, Leo, financially secure. But he had taken their future with him. The last year of their marriage had been strained. Liam's constant business trips, his emotional distance, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collars. Hannah had pushed away thoughts of an affair, but they always returned. After his death, the bad memories faded, leaving only the dull, relentless ache of loss. She told Leo that Daddy went on a long, important adventure. Now, for the first time in 3 years, Hannah was breaking free. She booked a trip to Miami to give her son the ocean, and herself a glimmer of hope for a new beginning. She had no idea this trip would resurrect a past she had desperately tried to bury. The drone of the jet engines was a soothing hum. Hannah watched the wispy clouds drift by, feeling the tension of the last few years finally begin to melt away. Beside her, 8-year-old Leo was glued to the window, his nose pressed against the cool acrylic. It was his first real flight, and his face was a perfect picture of pure joy. "Mom, look! We're higher than the birds," he shouted, turning to her with a wide grin. Hannah smiled back. That grin was her entire world. It was in that exact moment that Leo suddenly froze. His gaze locked onto something down the aisle, several rows ahead. His brow furrowed, a strange, intense focus in his eyes. He nudged her arm. "Mom," he whispered, his voice so quiet it was almost lost in the engine's roar. "Look, it's Dad." Hannah's heart skipped a beat, then began to hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird. An icy wave washed over her, a stark contrast to the stuffy cabin air. She forced herself to breathe, to remain calm for Leo, as she slowly turned her head, following her son's unwavering stare. A few rows ahead, a man sat with his back to them. He had broad shoulders and dark hair, cut shorter than Liam used to wear it, but there was something in his posture, in the confident way he leaned toward the blonde woman next to him, that was achingly familiar. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Leo, honey, you must be mistaken," she said, her voice a strained, artificial calm. "Lots of people look alike, you know." But the boy shook his head, his expression stubborn. "No, it's him. I know it is." Just then, the man turned slightly, giving Hannah a clear view of his profile as he spoke to his companion. The high cheekbones, the strong jawline, and the mole. The small, dark mole just below his jaw, the one she had kissed 1,000 times. The blood drained from her face. It couldn't be. This was a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by stress and years of unresolved grief. Liam was dead. She had held a memorial service. She had accepted condolences. She was a widow. The man turned away and the illusion was broken. Hannah squeezed her eyes shut, fighting for air. "Sweetheart, Daddy is on a very, very long adventure, remember? He can't be here," she whispered, trying to convince herself as much as her son. Leo pressed his lips together, his gaze returning to the window, a look of hurt defiance on his face. He didn't argue any more, but Hannah knew he wasn't convinced. The rest of the flight was a blur. Her mind raced, replaying that fleeting glimpse of the man with the mole. When the plane finally touched down in Miami and the passengers began to file out, she saw him again. He had put on a pair of dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured much of his face. Taking his companion, a young woman in a flashy, too-short dress, by the hand, He moved toward the exit. Hannah deliberately hung back, letting the crowd pass. She was terrified of seeing him up close, terrified of confirming her son's impossible claim, or worse, terrified of confirming that she was losing her mind. As she stepped into the bustling arrivals hall, she caught a glimpse of the couple getting into a sleek black Uber. The man held the door for the woman, a smooth, familiar gesture that sent another sharp pang through her heart. The hotel greeted them with a blast of air conditioning and the faint, clean scent of chlorine from the pool. Their room, with its balcony overlooking the turquoise ocean, should have been a paradise. Instead, Hannah felt a suffocating sense of dread. She unpacked their suitcases on autopilot while Leo, already in his swim trunks, bounced around her. "Mom, can we go to the beach now? Please," he begged. Hannah forced a smile and pushed the dark thoughts away. It was a coincidence. A shocking, unbelievable coincidence. But nothing more. She was here for her son. She wouldn't let a ghost from the past ruin their vacation. The first 2 days were surprisingly peaceful. The warm ocean, the cries of seagulls, the sweet fried dough of funnel cake on the boardwalk. Hannah almost managed to convince herself that the incident on the plane had been a trick of her overwrought imagination. She started to relax, feeling less like a widow and more like a mother on vacation for the first time in years. That evening, after tucking Leo into bed, she stepped onto the balcony with a glass of chilled white wine. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and salt. Suddenly, voices drifted up from the balcony directly below hers, an irritated male voice and a whining, high-pitched female one. "Jessica, can you please stop talking about money for 5 minutes? I brought you here to relax." The voice was gravelly, tired, but the cadence, the deep timbre, it was terrifyingly familiar. Hannah froze, her wineglass hovering halfway to her lips. "Relax. Liam, you call this relaxing? This tacky tourist trap in Miami? My friends are in the Maldives right now, and I'm stuck in this dump," the woman shrieked. Hannah's heart plummeted. Liam. Only she had ever called him that. And that voice, it was rougher now, aged by something she couldn't guess, but she would know it anywhere. Slowly, silently, she crept to the railing and peered over the edge. There he was, the man from the plane, standing on the balcony below, without his hat or sunglasses. Her husband, Liam, alive. He was wearing shorts and a polo shirt, a drink in his hand. He looked older, a little heavier, but it was him. There was no doubt left. I do everything I can for you," Liam continued, and she heard the hard steel edge in his voice that she knew so well. "But it's never enough. What's going to be left when your looks fade, huh?" That phrase. It was his signature line in any argument. What's going to be left? The words hit Hannah like a physical blow. The world swam before her eyes. She couldn't breathe. Stumbling back from the railing, she sank to the floor, clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real. Liam was alive. For 3 years, while she wore black, while she learned to live again, while she told their son stories about his adventurous father, he was alive. And now he was right here, 1 floor below, with some young woman. Grief, betrayal, and a white-hot rage swirled into a tight, suffocating knot in her chest. 3 years of a monstrous lie. This was beyond betrayal. It was something grotesque, something evil. She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or simply run. The initial shock receded, replaced by a sharp, icy fury. Hannah pulled herself up on trembling legs. She had to be sure. She had to see his face up close, look him in the eyes. Without a word to a sleeping Leo, she threw on a cardigan, slipped out of the room, and bolted for the stairs, ignoring the elevator. She paused on the landing of the floor below, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The door to the room directly beneath hers was slightly ajar. She could hear the tail end of their fight. "You'll regret this, Liam!" "I'm leaving you," the woman yelled. "Fine, go wherever you want," came the exhausted reply. The door flew open and the blonde, Jessica, stormed out. She swept past without noticing Hannah huddled in the dim light of the stairwell and disappeared into the main hallway. Hannah held her breath. A moment later, Liam appeared in the doorway. He rubbed his temples, sighed heavily, and walked toward the elevators. Instinctively, Hannah pressed herself deeper into the shadows. She should have screamed, confronted him, done something, but the words were lodged in her throat. She could only watch as her dead husband calmly waited for the elevator. As the elevator door slid shut, the paralysis broke. Hannah raced down the stairs, taking them two at a time. She had to know where he was going. She burst into the lobby just in time to see Liam walk into the hotel bar. Driven by an impulse she didn't understand, she followed him. She put on the sunglasses she always carried in her purse and ruffled her hair, desperate to alter her appearance. Slipping into the dimly lit bar, she saw him take a seat at the counter and order a bourbon. Hannah chose a stool several seats away, keeping her back to the room, and ordered a sparkling water. She watched his reflection in the mirrored wall behind the rows of liquor bottles. He downed the first glass quickly, then signalled for another. He looked drained, older than his years. The polished, confident charm she had once admired was gone, replaced by the weary slump of a deeply unhappy man. And somehow, that made his betrayal feel even more disgusting. He didn't look like a winner who had escaped to a glamorous new life. He looked defeated. "Hey!" His voice suddenly cut through her thoughts, directed at her. Hannah flinched. "Tell me something. Why are all of you so complicated?" He was already drunk, his eyes unfocused. He hadn't recognized her. He was just a man looking for a random stranger to vent to. "Maybe it just seems that way to you," Hannah replied, pitching her voice lower, rougher than usual. Her heart was beating so loudly, she was sure he could hear it across the empty seats between them. "Seems that way," he scoffed. "She drained me dry and then just left. And He trailed off, waving his hand dismissively. "And you walked away from someone smart and loyal to get this. You made your choice." The words escaped her, sharp and bitter with her own pain. Liam looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his drunken gaze. "You're perceptive, reading me like a book. But where does a woman like you get so much cynicism?" Hannah laughed, a bitter, silent laugh. Cynicism. He had no idea. "Life experience," she said curtly, standing up. She had to leave before he recognized her voice, before he looked too closely at her face. She threw some cash on the counter and walked quickly to the exit, feeling his confused, intoxicated stare on her back. Back in the room, she collapsed onto the bed. Leo was sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the hurricane raging inside his mother. There were no more doubts. It was him, alive, breathing and profoundly miserable. But his misery didn't inspire an ounce of pity in her, only cold, hard rage. How could he fake his own death, sentence her and their son to years of grief? For what? For that spoiled girl? It seemed too petty, too pathetic for the Liam she thought she knew, or had she ever really known him at all? 1,000 questions flooded her mind. Who else knew? His business partner, Mark Peterson, the man who had delivered the terrible news with such a convincing performance of sorrow. Was he in on it too? Her entire life for the past 3 years had been a sham, a cruel play built on an unforgivable lie. She stared at her reflection in the dark glass of the sliding door. Who was she now? Not a widow, but not a wife either. Just a fool who had been played. And what was she supposed to do with this horrific truth? Expose him? Cause a scene? Or just leave, pretend this never happened, and try to forget the nightmare? Hannah woke the next morning with a pounding headache and a singular, clear resolve. She would not run. She deserved answers. She put on a wide-brimmed sun hat and her largest pair of sunglasses. The disguise wasn't about fear anymore. It was about control. She would be the one to decide when and how their reunion would happen. As she and Leo went down for breakfast, they saw Jessica in the lobby. She was waiting for someone, nervously tapping a long, manicured nail against her phone screen. Soon Liam emerged from the elevator. He looked even worse than the night before, pale, his face creased with exhaustion. Jessica immediately launched into a tirade of complaints. They walked right past Hannah without a second glance. It was clear the girl had returned. They were heading to the beach. Hannah took Leo's hand and followed at a distance. She would watch. She needed to understand what he had become. The beach was already crowded. Hannah found 2 empty lounge chairs several rows behind, where Liam and Jessica had set up camp. It was far enough to remain unnoticed, but close enough to overhear them if the wind was right. Leo immediately ran toward the waves, and Hannah pretended to read her book, but every ounce of her attention was fixed on the couple. Their argument from the night before had clearly resumed. "You couldn't even get us decent chairs," Jessica hissed. "I'm stuck in the shade here. It's like a crypt." Liam mumbled a tired response, but she was relentless. "And look at you, what a mess! You look old and worn out. On top of everything, I had to ride the elevator with some washed-up single mum with baggage this morning. It totally ruined my vibe." The phrase "single mum with baggage" struck Hannah like a physical blow. She lowered her book. At that moment, Liam, seemingly overwhelmed by the argument and the oppressive heat, suddenly clutched his head. "Jess, I don't feel good," he gasped before slumping sideways and collapsing onto the lounger, unconscious. "Liam! Liam, what's wrong with you?" Jessica screamed. Her cry was filled not with concern, but with panic and a strange disgust. She looked around helplessly, making no move to help him. People nearby turned to stare, but no one approached. In that instant, something inside Hannah snapped. It was pure instinct. Over the years of their marriage, she knew Liam had a minor heart condition and couldn't handle extreme heat well. Without a second thought, she ripped off her hat and sunglasses and ran towards him. Her hands moved with a muscle memory she didn't know she possessed, unbuttoning his collar, checking his pulse. It was faint and thready. "Go! Get the hotel medic now!" she yelled at the frozen Jessica. "And bring water!" The girl, blinking in terror, finally lurched into action and ran toward the hotel. Hannah carefully turned Liam's head to the side to ensure his airway was clear and began fanning his face with a towel. She was a machine, not thinking about who he was or what he had done. He was just a person who needed help. After a minute or two, Liam groaned and his eyes fluttered open. His glazed look slowly came into focus, landing on her face. Recognition dawned, slow and disbelieving. He blinked once, then again. "Hannah?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is that you? Am I dreaming?" His eyes were wide with shock, fear, and something else. Something that looked like relief. "It's me," she said flatly, not moving her hand from his forehead. In that moment she felt no anger, no pain, just a strange, hollow emptiness. Just then, the hotel medic arrived, with Jessica trailing nervously behind. As the doctor began his assessment, Hannah silently retreated to her own chair. She watched them give Liam an injection, saw the colour slowly return to his face. He sat up, his eyes scanning the crowd, searching for her. But Hannah was already hidden again behind her hat and sunglasses, just another face on the crowded beach. Supported by the medic, Liam staggered back towards the hotel, Jessica fluttering beside him with frightened whispers. The game of hide-and-seek was over. He knew she was here, and he would be coming for her. She was right. Less than an hour later, there was a soft knock on their hotel room door. Leo was watching cartoons, and Hannah, asking him to turn the volume down, went to open it. Liam stood on the threshold. He had changed into a clean shirt and combed his hair, but he was still deathly pale. He looked like a guilty child awaiting punishment. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Hannah stepped aside without a word, letting him pass. She closed the door and leaned against it, her arms crossed over her chest. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. "How did you find us?" Her voice was steady and cold. "I asked the front desk for Hannah Miller's room. We still have the same last name." "Or we did," he faltered. He glanced towards the living area, where the sounds of cartoons drifted from. "Is Leo in there?" Hannah nodded. "I need to explain. Please, just let me talk." His voice was pleading. Talk, she clipped, not inviting him to sit. She wanted him to stand, to feel every ounce of her silent judgment. He began his story, a narrative so cliché it sounded like the plot of a bad thriller. A real estate deal that went south, a massive debt to dangerous people. He spoke of threats, first against him, then hints of threats against her and Leo. I had no choice, Hannah. They would have used you and Leo to get to me, he said, staring at the carpet. We couldn't just leave, they were already watching me. So, Mark and I came up with this plan. Hearing his partner's name was a fresh stab of betrayal. Mark, their friend, the man who had held her hand at the memorial service. A plan, she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. To fake your own death and condemn your wife and son to a living hell? That's a brilliant plan, Liam. Truly a work of genius. She stared at him, trying to decipher if he was lying, and she couldn't decide which was worse. If he was lying, he was a pathetic monster. If he was telling the truth, he was a coward who chose the cruelest possible solution, offloading all the pain onto his family. Mark promised he'd take care of you, make sure you were okay with the insurance money, the business, he continued, his voice trailing off. Oh, he took care of me, Hannah interrupted, her voice laced with venom. He delivered the news of your death with such a look of profound sympathy, I almost bought his act. Do you honestly believe money could replace a father for my son? Or a husband for me? Do you have any idea what you put us through? The tears she had held back for so long burned at the back of her throat, but she swallowed them down. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. I know I acted like a monster, he whispered. I've thought about it every single day, every damn day for 3 years. I don't expect you to understand or forgive me. I wanted you to know why. He finally looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw a depth of despair that almost made her pity him. But the feeling vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by cold fury. His reasons were not an excuse. And Jessica? Is she part of your witness protection program too? A necessary part of the cover story? Hannah asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Liam's face went even paler. No, that happened later. I was alone, moving between cities, using a different name. I changed my last name to Campbell. It was unbearable. I just wanted not to be alone. Not to be alone, Hannah hissed, keeping her voice low so Leo wouldn't hear. Well, I was alone, with a child who asked me every night when his daddy was coming home from his adventure. You traded your family, your entire life, for a life on the run with cheap distractions. She took a step towards him, and he instinctively backed away. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Hannah. I don't deserve it. But I am asking you to let me see Leo. Just once. The request hit her like a punch to the gut. Her son. He was dragging their innocent son into this toxic mess. It was a low blow, and it left her reeling, unsure of how to respond. Her heart was torn between protecting her child and the knowledge that Leo deserved to know his father was alive. I'll think about it, she said, her voice like ice. It was all she could manage. She pulled the door open, a clear dismissal. Liam left without another word. Later that evening, a text message arrived. Let's meet at the bar, 10 o'clock. Without Leo. We need to finish this conversation. Hannah hesitated, but the need for closure, for all the ugly details to be laid bare, won out. After putting Leo to bed, she went downstairs. Liam was already there, at a small table in the darkest corner of the room. He looked sober and composed. He started talking again, repeating his apologies, detailing his life in hiding. Hannah listened silently, feeling detached, like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. The rage had subsided into a vast, empty numbness. It was then that Jessica appeared at their table, her face a mask of fury. So this is where you are, you snake! I knew you were with this hag! She shrieked, pointing a trembling, acrylic-tipped finger at Hannah. The public scene Hannah had dreaded was about to begin. Jessica! Calm down! It's not what you think, Liam said, jumping to his feet. but she was beyond reason. "Not what I think! You dumped me for this old washed-up single mom with baggage," she screeched, her voice attracting stares from everyone in the bar. Hannah sat perfectly still, watching the drama unfold with a strange, cold calm. She didn't feel shame, only a detached curiosity. "Darling," Hannah's voice cut through the air, sweet as poison. "You've got it slightly wrong. He didn't dump you for me, he dumped me for you. But as you can see, that was a mistake. Men always find their way back to where they were truly loved. Women like you are just a temporary detour." The words hit Jessica like a slap. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Liam stared at Hannah with a mixture of horror and awe. He had never seen her like this, strong, merciless, and utterly in control. The broken, grieving woman he had abandoned 3 years ago was gone. In her place sat a queen on a throne of ice. "What? What wife?" Jessica stammered, her eyes darting between Liam and Hannah. "The one and only," Liam confirmed with a heavy sigh. "The one I walked out on." "Walked out on?" Hannah interjected, with a sharp, humourless smile. "That's a polite way of putting it. I believe the official story was a tragic snowmobiling accident on Lake Tahoe." Jessica's eyes widened in horror as the pieces clicked into place. "So that little boy, he's yours? You lied to me. You lied about everything." Her voice broke into a sob. She shot Liam a look of pure hatred, then turned and fled from the bar. Liam watched her go, a lost look on his face, then turned back to Hannah. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Because she needed to be put in her place, and because you deserve to be publicly humiliated," Hannah replied calmly, finishing her water. "Welcome back to the real world, Liam. It's not always pretty." She stood, and without a backward glance walked out of the bar, leaving him alone in the centre of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of his new life. She found him later in a small, manicured garden on the hotel grounds. He was sitting on a bench under a palm tree, shoulders slumped, staring into the darkness. He looked completely broken. Hannah sat down next to him. The silence stretched between them for several minutes, thick with unspoken history. "She's gone. Packed her bags and left," he said, without turning his head. "I'm sorry to hear that," Hannah replied, with no sympathy in her voice. "Don't be," he said with a bitter laugh. "You were right. It was all a pathetic fantasy. I don't even know why I did it. I guess I was trying to run away from myself, but you can't outrun who you are." He finally turned to face her, and in the dim garden light, she saw the glint of tears in his eyes. "You've changed so much, Hannah. You're so strong now. I barely recognize you." "Grief has a way of doing that," she said with a shrug. "I had to be strong. Unlike some people, I didn't have a choice." Her words were another blow, but this time he didn't flinch. He just looked at her, and his gaze held not just guilt, but a desperate, flickering hope. "Hannah, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but Leo, he deserves to know. I want to see him, talk to him. I'll explain everything when he's old enough to understand, but for now, please." He spoke softly, all his former arrogance gone, replaced by raw desperation. Hannah was quiet for a long time, watching the dark shapes of the palm trees sway against the night sky. This was the hardest decision of her life. Letting this man back into her son's world meant inviting chaos, pain, and the potential for more disappointment. Yet, to deny Leo his father, when he was alive, and just yards away, felt like a betrayal of a different kind. "All right," she said finally. "Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, at the cafe by the pool. But there are conditions. To him, you are an explorer who just got back from a very long expedition. Not one word of the truth. And the second I see him looking upset or uncomfortable, the meeting is over." "Thank you," he breathed, the words heavy with relief. "Thank you, Hannah. I'll do whatever you say. I won't let you down. Not this time." The meeting went surprisingly well. Leo, whom Hannah had carefully prepared, was radiant with happiness. He stared at his father with adoring eyes, peppering him with questions about his adventures and discoveries. Liam played his part perfectly. He spun fantastic tales of mountains and jungles, his face lit with a genuine joy she hadn't seen in years. Hannah watched them from a nearby table, her heart a tangled knot of conflicting emotions. She saw with painful clarity how much Leo had missed having a father, and she saw the way Liam looked at his son, with a love and regret so profound, it was impossible to doubt its sincerity. At one point, Liam caught her eye over Leo's head, and his look was a silent, desperate question, a question about their future. She quickly looked away. She didn't have an answer. It was too complicated, too painful, too soon. They spent the rest of the day together. They walked along the boardwalk, ate ice cream, and built sandcastles by the shore. From a distance, they looked like a perfect, happy family on vacation. By evening, as they said their goodbyes near the elevator, Leo asked the question that had been hanging in the air all day. "Dad, are you going to live with us now?" The question landed with a thud in the quiet lobby. Liam looked at Hannah, his face a mask of panic and hope. "Honey, Dad has to sort out a lot of things now that he's back," Hannah intervened smoothly. "He needs to find a new job, a place to live. We'll see each other as much as we possibly can. Right, Dad?" "That's right," Liam said firmly, crouching down to Leo's level. "I promise I will never, ever disappear for that long again." He hugged Leo tightly, and Hannah felt a lump form in her throat. This day had been simultaneously the most joyous and the most agonizing of the last 3 years. It had given her son his father back, but for her it had only reopened old wounds and filled her with confusion. That night, long after Leo had fallen asleep, her phone rang. It was Liam. "I can't sleep," he said, his voice low. "I keep thinking about today, and about Leo's question. Maybe he's right, Hannah. Maybe we should try again. I know I destroyed everything, but I've changed. This life on the run, this whole mess with Jessica, it all just showed me what I lost. I lost you, and I will do anything to get you back." His words were the ones she had fantasized about hearing for 3 long, lonely years. But now that they were real, they brought no joy, only a profound chill. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life without him, to construct a fortress where she and Leo were safe. Now he was asking her to tear down the walls and let him back in. She remained silent, and in the space between her silence and his waiting, their entire future was being decided. "No, Liam," she said at last, and the single word felt like lifting an immense weight. The line went dead silent. "I can't," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Not now. What you did, you can't just erase it. I've forgiven you, for Leo's sake and for my own, so I could let go of the anger. But forgiving isn't the same as forgetting. The trust you shattered doesn't grow back overnight. You can be a father to Leo. I will never stand in the way of that. But us, our relationship, I'm not willing to risk my heart again. Not yet." She expected him to argue, to persuade, but he only let out a long, quiet sigh. "I understand. I really do. Thank you for being honest with me, and thank you for our son." She knew in her bones that she had made the right choice, the only choice possible. She had chosen herself and her peace of mind. The next day, they were flying home. Liam came to the airport to see them off. He kept a respectful distance, not wanting to overwhelm Leo. When their flight was called, he approached them. "Hannah," he said, looking her directly in the eyes, "your answer last night, is that final? Or do I have a 1 in a million shot?" She looked at him, then at the happy face of her son, who was waving enthusiastically at his father. The hatred was gone. In its place was a deep weariness and a tiny, fragile seed of hope. "We'll see," she said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was the promise of a future, a different, uncertain future that they would all have to build from the ground up, maybe together, maybe apart. She turned and, taking Leo's hand, walked toward the gate without looking back. She was leaving Miami, not as a widow and not as a wife. She was leaving as a free woman who had finally reclaimed her right to choose. Once on the plane, soaring above the clouds, Hannah realized that this short, insane vacation had changed her forever. It had dragged her darkest fears and deepest pains into the light, but in return, it had given her something priceless: strength. The strength to forgive without being a fool, the strength to love her child more than she hated her own wounds, the strength to say no to the man she might, in some corner of her heart, still love. Leo slept soundly on her shoulder. Exhausted from the excitement, she kissed the top of his head and smiled. The future was unknown, but for the first time in years it didn't scare her. She knew she would be okay, with or without Liam. Her own long, difficult expedition to find herself was finally over, and she had returned a victor. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled like a million tiny guideposts for her new path. Liam stood at the airport's panoramic window, watching the plane until it was just a blinking light in the vast darkness. He didn't feel the sting of rejection, but a strange, unfamiliar sense of peace. Her "we'll see" wasn't a door slammed in his face. It was a challenge. He had burned everything to the ground, and now it was up to him to rebuild, brick by painful brick. Not their relationship, not yet. Himself. He had to prove, not to her, but to himself, that he was no longer the selfish coward who ran away 3 years ago. He had to earn the right to be a father, and maybe, one day, far in the future, he could earn back her trust. He pulled out his phone and dialed his old partner's number. "Mark, it's me. Things have changed. I'm coming back. For real this time." For the first time in 3 years, he knew exactly what he had to do. The road ahead was long, but now he had a reason to walk it, and that changed everything. He turned from the window and walked toward the exit, towards a new, honest life. On that sun-drenched beach in Miami, Hannah buried her past for a second time. But this time, she also buried her weakness. The shocking return of her dead husband didn't break her. It forged her into something stronger. She didn't fall back into his arms, blinded by old feelings, nor did she slam the door forever, depriving her son of a father. She chose a third path, the path of wisdom and self-respect. She gave him the chance to be a father, but reserved the right to decide if he ever deserved to be her husband again. This story isn't a fairy tale about a miraculous reunion. It's about the hard truth that real forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's the conscious choice to move forward without letting the past write your future. Hannah took her life back, and that was her greatest victory. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in her place? Could you ever forgive a betrayal of this magnitude?